it's never about the other person. It's never about the world outside of us, really, when you look at the nuts and bolts of it. Today's talk is about forgiveness through wisdom. I don't know about you, but every time I've heard the word forgiveness since I was a child, I cringed. I would cringe. I was just like, it's not fair. Why do I have to forgive? I know when my father would discipline us, old school style, at the end, my mom would always tell us, go ahead and kiss your father's hand. Really? That's not fair. That's not right. So these were some of the narratives that would play in the background. So we all have our own ways of reacting to the word forgiveness. And it is a sensitive area because it's like walking on a sharp katana or Japanese sword. You have to be careful how you tread on that. The reason why I say it is so, at least for me, to my understanding, it can be a stumbling block. We can easily fall to either one of extremes of completely relinquishing wisdom, discernment, and going about and just giving ourselves completely without thinking much about it. That's one. Another extreme would be just to go ahead and hold that grudge. So that doesn't work either, because we know that eventually it will cause such a huge havoc within us. So how do we work around that then? You know, there are so many examples in the Tripitaka with either the Buddha giving instructions or exemplifying it through his own acts and behaviors towards someone who obviously was, in the act of, committing a wrongdoing. And the subtlety with which the Buddha would respond, whether it was through his silence, through his behavior, and similarly with his own monks and nuns who were exposed to ignorance by people sometimes, and how they've reacted to those situations. So I use those as an example, as an anchor. But there's this other thing which I've always been curious about, and that has to do with surrender. When we're children, we're very passionate about life. We have this wide-eyed, fully aware presence. It's somehow something happens and we kind of move away from that kind of an approach in life. We become somewhat jaded, we become somewhat more cautious about how we respond to certain people's behaviors, especially when it relates to their actions that were in some way hurtful to us, whether it's a look, a gaze, a physical act, a word. Usually a word does such a number on us, because even 50, 60 years later, we still recall that certain thing that that person said to us. That person might have died decades earlier. Last week, one of the meditators struggling with a certain question, existential issue for her, was dealing with such a situation. And I asked her whether she wanted this person who's wronged her in her opinion, and who's definitely caused her such a turmoil in her life, whether she was deep down expecting that person to crawl to her on hands and knees, begging for her mercy, begging for her apology, just apologizing. And you could see on her face this smile came up, but immediately it was turned into this, yeah, I know it's not going to happen. I know I'm being foolish, but it was there. She didn't say a word. Her smile said it all. And I've noticed that many times we have this agenda, this secret agenda that we have within ourselves that, yeah, I'll hold on to this until that person comes to us, you know, rings us up or sends us an email saying, oh, I must have been such a fool to have done this to you. I was so blind, da 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 da. That day might come, but it's a long shot. Or it might not. But one thing is guaranteed to be taking place. And that's the example where the Buddha he himself gave, where trying to hold on to anger is like holding on to this hot, red hot piece of coal. And as we grasp, as we grip into it even more and more and more, it's like us holding on to that fiery coal, expecting the moment for us to actually toss that or throw that into the other person. Even if that time came, we might miss. But one thing we haven't missed, and that is the burning of our own hands, or our own decades. Okay, so what does that leave us with? Accepting what the other person did, accepting what the other person keeps on doing. Sometimes it's not a one-time thing that has happened in the past and that's the end of it. Sometimes we have to some degree, live with it, so be surrounded by it. So what do we do? Remember the example of the sharp sword? If you're dealing with a sharp sword, they usually have with it a scabbard, a sheath, a something that you place it in. So the same thing I might suggest, using on that, working on with that metaphor. However, I like to use more the aspect of wisdom, discernment, while we are forgiving. It's a process. It's not a one-time thing. Some of us have gone through some major trauma. I was talking with another clinician this past week, and I told this person it's trauma doesn't just happen constantly. It happens all the time. Now, having said that, it doesn't reoccur in the objective way that we might understand it. See, I always go back to my own self, my own body, to kind of look for examples of things, if I can find them. And sometimes I catch myself in front of the mirror with my shoes off, and I notice the differences between my feet. I don't have toes on my right foot, and it's a shocking reality. Now, that has been the case for over 30 some years. I still am shocked by that. Now, immediately I recall all the pain that I went through. Now, the trauma, however, the incident itself took place back in time. Sometime in August 1978. But it happened then. Boom, done. The issue has been me carrying over all the fears, the anticipations, the anxieties, the dread, the constant threat of it reoccurring. And we have names for these different traumas. One of, this one happens to be PTSD. Okay, fine. So what do we do with that? We need to exercise, engage with the whole phenomenon through the medium of utilizing our wisdom, understanding, and literally sometimes talking ourselves through the whole process of all those anxieties that we go through. Now, initially when I first started to talk today, I said it's never about the person outside. During retreats, some teachers will go ahead and just say abstaining from talking, period. There's no talking during a retreat. Fine. There's other teachers who would also use some other techniques, let's say a little bit of talking here and there, practicing noble speech, for example. One of my teachers always insists on talking, however, doing it mindfully. Now, that he doesn't stop there. He says, don't pay any attention to what the other person is saying. And you just start laughing like, that's so cold. But in fact, there's a point to that. Don't pay any attention to what the other person is saying, but think about, experience, become aware of what is happening inside of you, between your ears when you're listening to this person talking. See, we've forgotten the art of listening. Today when we listen, we're just actually gathering our forces for a major attack, major assault. We never listen to the other person. We're just loading up the gun, as it were. How in the world will there be any healthy, harmonious communication? A key part of the Eightfold Path. So, if this negative conversation is already going on within us, even when we come out and say to the other person, oh, I forgive you, or even to ourselves, we might turn it into a mantra, we might say it 1,008 times a day, but really it's not going to do much. We're just going to be adding more resentment. So first there was dislike, that turns into a sense of resentment, which also has a lot to do with what we talk about, the second poison or the second defilement, aversion. Now this is when it gets really tricky, because it's very difficult for us to dislodge ourselves from that sense of hatred. It's a heavy-duty emotion. It's literally heavy to move. It's like a heavy boulder. And it does refuse to move simply because we have so many excuses and explanations as to why it needs to be there. Because we have memories. Memories that we have carried in our own bodies. And the body is the perfect witness to all that we experience, good and bad, with all of the five senses associated with it. So, thinking about forgiveness, I was looking through it from the lens of the perfections. In Buddhism, in Theravada Buddhism, we have 10 perfections. In Mahayana, we have 7. Usually it's the other way around. There's more numbers in Mahayana. There's more of this than in Theravada. But in this case, the paramis, there's more of them, apparently. So, as I was looking at the forgiveness act of it, I started seeing how it needs to have, definitely, patience. We need to be patient with ourselves. We need to be patient with the experiencing of it. If it has been something that took place and left its mark on your body, whether metaphorically, whether in real life, forgiving our body, first of all. Can I forgive my body for having been abused? In my case, it was something that I can't even point my finger on as to who was the perpetrator. It was just a bomb, boom, blow up, and I deal with it. Nobody that I can really point fingers at, which is in itself another trauma. But with other individuals, it might be an actual person or persons, people, that might have done us harm. They might even be alive. How can I actually gather the strength and softness to come up and actually forgive that person? If I don't have any patience to first of all deal with the pain, and second, to be generous. Now again, please be mindful that it's not blindly accepting the person and accepting the act and accepting what has taken place and saying, yeah, I'm just going to ignore it and I'm just going to forgive it because my practice, my spiritual leanings dictate that I do. I have to, as in Christianity, I have to turn the other cheek. Well, if you're going to turn the other cheek without resolving these issues deep down, guess what? You're opening the door for major, major havoc within you. There's other trauma that now you've inflicted upon yourself. Because you have not been honest and truthful to the pain. You have not respected the pain enough. So time obviously is a valuable thing in this scenario. So already when we're being generous, by allowing it the space and not just becoming identified with the whole act, we've all been harmed, we've all been hurt, we've all been wronged in so many ways. There's no way around it. You have to really go through it by at least accepting it. And that acceptance requires such room for being generous. And trusting, which is another element of patience. Now another parami or perfection is that of nekkhamma, or the renunciation, relinquishment. Now the relinquishment does not mean you are denying the fact that this thing happened. You're simply refusing to hold on to that red hot coal. That's what it means. You're not blind. You are fully aware of what took place, but you're simply refusing to put that in the crosshairs of your life, to continue living your life with that boulder in front of your eyes. Wherever you turn, that's what you see. That's what we're relinquishing. Some years ago, there was a movie, The Mission. It won several Oscars. An incredible movie, powerful, powerful movie. In it, there's a scene, I hope I'm not, giving it away. It's been around for like 30 years or so. But there's a scene where Robert De Niro's character has killed his own brother in a duel. He was imposing on himself this incredible torture. First of all, he had gone to a monastery and he was refusing to be treated like a human. The monks pitied him and they eventually agreed to take him on a mission into the Amazon jungle. This is happening several centuries ago. So at one point, actually he agrees to do so only if he carries within a huge net, a fish net, all of the weapons that he owned. And he was a conquistador actually. So he was a military guy. So he took all of his weapons, and the priests, the Jesuits, they were like, okay, if that's the only way, then go ahead. And he's like, no one is allowed to cut the rope on it though. I will go with you to the jungles and the rainforest. No one interferes with what I go through. I will bear it. And they say, fine. So they take him with them. So there's so many incredible scenes where he's even crawling, literally, hands and nails, fingers and nails, just going up this cliff with waterfalls spewing over his head. And he comes across the tribe that he used to traumatize himself as a conquistador, whose members he had taken as slaves in the past, and they recognize him. And the chief of the tribe comes over and puts his knife on his neck, on De Niro's character's neck. And he's about to cut it, make him feel like he's cutting it, but he doesn't. He just sees if he's really meaning any of the acts that he's going through, and he sees the torture that the Niro is going through. At that moment, when you think, ooh, something bad is going to happen, he reaches over, and the huge net of weaponry that is hanging from the edge of the cliff, which is attached to his neck, which is attached to his body, this chief of the tribe who has been traumatized, who had such issues with this man, dealing with his own forgiveness issues, reaches over and snaps that takes the knife and cuts the rope. And you see this boulder-like fishnet with all these weaponry coming down the cliff, and as if all of the viewers of this movie, they just sighed. They just, because we were feeling what he was going through. But the other person who was perpetrated, the victim, did that. Now, we often don't have that luxury. Like I said earlier, sometimes our perpetrators, the people who have done us wrong, or the situations that have done us wrong, are nowhere to be found. They don't exist on this planet anymore. What do? There's different techniques that we can prescribe to people as clinicians. One of them is the empty chair. You imagine the person sitting right there, and you're privately sitting there. There's nobody else in the room, just you and the empty chair, and then you visualize, you think about this person sitting right across from you. And you tell them how it felt, how you have gone through. So this is one way that we can deal with that turmoil. You can't just do this in a vacuum by yourself from one day to the next, expect yourself to completely heal. That's not going to happen. The trauma is going to be there. Even post-forgiveness. It's what we do with it. And that is where acceptance comes. That is where the passionate approach to life that a child has comes. That is where the wide-eyed approach to life comes. See, when you think about acceptance, it's all about surrender. Because we, as growing up in a culture like this, in today's time period, in the world, we have been given so many preferences. Schools do this, degrees do this, people we hang out with do this. We have all these lists of things that kind of indicate as to who we are or who we're supposed to be, with our likes and dislikes. So by the time you're 20 or 30 or 40, the list is getting longer. You're getting more refined in your preferences. So in order for life to be acceptable and beautiful and loving and whatever, cozy and comfy, it needs to meet certain criteria, hence the preferences. And oddly enough, that is exactly the reason why we have moved away in a polar opposite to what we used to be as passionate little children, fully aware of the life that was taking place around us, the juiciness of it. Now, you can't just go ahead and blindly trust or surrender either. It's like going, throwing a boat into the sea or the ocean while there's a hole in the boat. We know what's going to happen. It's going to sink. So being forgiving, or forgiveness through wisdom, is like that boat that does not have any holes in it. And that is the way that we can actually cross the sea or the ocean. So my invitation to you is to remind yourself, whether you're all in, whether you're actually aware of the boat having holes in it. And that hole, it happens to be, in this case, the factor of wisdom, the perfection of wisdom that needs to be there. And by the way, forgiveness cannot function without having held hands with loving kindness. We need to take care of our love. We need to take care of our awareness. We need to take care of our bodies, our emotions, our loved ones, yes, but most importantly, we need to take care of our mindset, what we are functioning with. That is the communication between the ears that goes on. So many of us are living life so seriously, with so many preferences. And then we see a child who's laughing, who's running across the lawn, and they're just, you know, or even a pet, an animal doing something, and they're just like, oh, that's so cute. That's so lovely. You want to go and hold them to kind of get some of that, you know, on you. But it's rather simple and not necessarily easy, as we're finding out, right? So, similarly to that, you know, I said love, loving kindness, life. Loving kindness or life are like bread, are like rice. You have to make it every single day. You can't just wait for it. Yeah, I'd done it once. Hey, it's there. It's like sitting there like a rock or a stone. It's not going to work. The author Ursula Le Guin, she actually mentions how love is not like a stone. It's like bread. You have to make it and remake it and remake it every single day. How many times do we look at someone that we care about and we don't feel like we need to put in as much energy into that day to kind of show or express or something, how we felt. We're just, yeah, I got them this yesterday. Now, the same attitude I'm inviting us to actually carry with us towards ourselves. Because, again, it's not about the outside world that has wronged us or harmed us. Ultimately, it's how we hold ourselves. I know for myself, from my own situation that I described briefly, I used to despise my body because my security was taken away. It was shattered. There was no way that even my parents, with all their love and attention, that they could give it back. Even at 1/10 of it. It was gone. So I had to come to grips with the fact that, yes, this has happened. Now, can I hold the grudge against my own body? Because it's no longer about the outside world. It's about how I look at myself. So many of us, many people who have been wronged by outside individuals, whether it's our bodies, whether it's our dignity, integrity, all that. How are we viewing ourselves after the fact? Because that incident took place in the past. But we have been repeating that assault on ourselves since that day. And that is the problem. Can we be basically forgiving towards ourselves, therefore? That is my bottom line. Can we maintain that? The moment you have an angry feeling coming up, while you're driving, while you're sitting, while you're talking with someone, and somebody says or does something, and you feel this anger, resentment, hatred, and then you catch yourself through awareness. Now, the question is, can you maintain that sense of, it's okay. I just got, ticked off at this person for doing this. It's okay. Not what they did was okay, what and how I'm looking at myself. Again, when we're forgiving, we are not forgiving the repeatability of the act, letting them get away with it. No. We are in fact setting ourselves free. The other person, that is their own issue that caused them to do this or that and harmed us in this way or that. They might have actually ended up doing it to other people or might continue doing that in the future. That is their call. But my responsibility lies between how I hold that bond between me and that other person, or that situation, or that incident. So removing that knife again, that katana, and then cutting the bond from my side. How the other person deals with it, it's their freedom to choose to continue or not. Every one of us is responsible for our own thoughts, speech, and actions. And that is something we have to deal with. So this talk is, or was, we have time? Ante? All right, 2 minutes. Oh, no, wait a minute. 1 minute? All right, so basically it's about...
30 seconds.
So remember that the first step in forgiving starts with ourselves, and the last as well. And what you do in between, use it wisely. Thank you.